Welcome everyone to the next installment of our Best Practice Network webinars. As people are signing in, we'll have this screen up and we'll take a few more minutes to let people join the webinar, and then we'll get started. Thank you. Welcome everyone to our May Best Practice Network webinar. We are very fortunate to have Farron Levy, President of True Impact, joining us today. He will be speaking on measuring the value of volunteerism, practical techniques, and ROI benchmarking results. Per our usual logistical start, for those of you on the call, if you could look at your panel on the right side of your screen and type into the chat box or post a question to me, I'll be able to know that you can hear me and the audio is working fine. So as I see some of those coming in, perfect. It looks like everyone can hear me. Wonderful. Similar to previous webinars, the presentation and sample report from True Impact will be available after. I will send you a copy. And also we'll have a recording of the webinar up on the VolunteerMatch YouTube channel. Throughout the webinar, if you have a question, you can click on your raise your hand symbol in your panel, or you can post in a question and I will pose it to Farron as we go through his presentation. There will always be time at the end for Q&A, so if you would like to save your questions till then, that works as well. Additionally, if you have colleagues who were not able to join us or you have to drop off early, you can follow the conversation on Twitter at VM_solutions with the hashtag BPN_ROI. So to get us started, I'm very happy to have Farron Levy, President of True Impact, joining us. True Impact is an organization that provides web-based tools and consulting services to help organizations quantify the social, financial, and environmental return on investment of their corporate citizenship activities. I must apologize, there is some construction outside our window, so I'll quickly turn this over to Farron so we can get started. Farron has a lot of experience in social auditing and other strategic consulting. So I will get us started by turning the presentation over to his screen. And we'll begin. Farron, are you on the line?
I am. All right, let me,
Farron, if you can click play on your screen.
There we go. Is it showing up?
Perfect. And you're loud and clear.
Great. All right. Well, thanks a lot, and thanks everyone for joining and for your interest in this project. My grand plan is to kind of give you a background on the whole ROI tracking initiative that we implemented with the Point to Light Institute's hands-on network, and present to you some of the results from the first round of that initiative, and at the same time give you some frameworks on how you can think about measuring your own volunteer activities by all the different social and business categories, and then leave hopefully a good amount of time for Q&A about the process, or even about other ways to measure these different impacts even beyond what we did with this initiative. So let me jump into it. So first, kind of as quick background, yes, we at True Impact, we specialize specialize in measurement, and about a year and a half ago we developed a formal relationship with the Points of Light Institute's hands-on network to help provide some measurement services to their different networks. And one of the main initiatives that we developed was this Volunteerism ROI tracker, and that was something that we did in collaboration with their Corporate Service Council ROI committee. So that really that consisted of volunteer managers and CSR managers from a variety of mostly Fortune 500 companies who have for years been tracking things like the number of employees who volunteer, number of hours, number of nonprofits. They occasionally field a satisfaction survey or two, but they're really interested in taking it to a next level and really looking at what would be the what are some data on the actual social impact of what they're doing and the business value. And so that was the real focus. They needed it to be additive and not duplicative to what they've been tracking for years, and it also had to not take up any of their time because everyone is extremely busy these days. So what we ultimately came up with was what turned out to be a really effective solution, and that is we used web-based surveys that we customized to each individual company, so it's all custom branded by company, and those surveys we would send centrally to their individual volunteers. So the email and then the link survey would all be custom branded and would have some custom content in it, but would contain a number of standardized social and business impact questions. And then what that allowed us to do was, number one, the volunteer managers wouldn't have to do anything to administer it, but the volunteers themselves would answer all the questions. Those data would go directly to our servers, and then we'd extract that information and generate these customized ROI reports for each participating company, so they could see what of their volunteer portfolio was performing really well in a variety of different categories. And you see them here: social value, satisfaction, skills, sales, recruiting, stakeholder relations, or risk, and which ones might be falling short a bit and might offer them some opportunities for improvement. And then importantly, because most people find it very satisfying to quantify different impacts, but then often they're left saying, gee, is that good or not? I don't know. A key piece of it was the benchmarking component. So we also anonymously benchmarked individual companies' results against the rest of the network, so they could get a sense of really how well they were performing. So what I'm going to run through now are some aggregate results from the entire group, and the real focus of this is on this being a management tool. An internal management tool to help you with your own internal or even external reporting requirements, but also helping to promote continuous improvement, find out what's working and support that, or find out what's falling short and addressing it, or guiding your resources to those things that really give you the biggest bang for your buck. So let me run through each of these different categories, starting with well, let me give you this first overview page. This gives you a sense of gives you the context with the benchmarking group. So you see here on the left the 21 mostly Fortune 500 organizations that participated. So from Coca-Cola and GE and Pfizer, PNC, Salesforce, Starbucks, UPS, and so on. We had almost 9,000 individual volunteers participating or responding that we collected data from. We had really high response rates between about 25% and up to 50%, with most kind of around the mid-30s. And then you can see these are the different impact categories that we collected data on. And actually the report, and I'll show you that at the end just to give people a sense of what the deliverable was, uses this format. So each slide would kind of have your value, your impact, how it compares to the benchmark group, and then opportunities for improvement. Because again, it's very much an internal kind of management tool. And then we have a key here for you get ranked, and then also the general quartiles for benchmark ratings. So let's jump into it. This first category is social value, and we look at that in two ways. One is the value of the services being provided, and the other is the impact on the nonprofits themselves. So to start with the services provided, this is kind of one step beyond what is familiar to a lot of people. The independent sector has an average value per volunteer hour, and I think in 2010 it's about $21.36, and that's really just a composite of from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, all the potential activities that kind of go on in the workforce in the U.S. It's an average of that, and people can generally apply it to an individual hour, and folks have been using that for a while. What we've done here is we actually break out the individual types of volunteer activities that are being provided and use that same data source to assign a market value to each of those. And then what we're doing is we're multiplying it against the number of hours that are being delivered. And that ultimately kind of helps us come up with a weighted average for an individual company's portfolio of activities. And the idea here is that some activities just are higher leverage than others, and that's typically your skills-based activities. So you can see here that some, like the lowest, food preparation and sorting, kind of around the $11 an hour rate, while you can get more into things like IT support, management consulting, general operations. That can be 4, 5, or 6 times that value. And to the degree that someone wants to improve that number, it's really looking at and bringing attention to the mix of volunteer activities that your employees are providing. So over here, so you'd have this is kind of the aggregate number of all the participating volunteers, the hours, the value, and then this is the kind of benchmark range out of the 21 companies that participated. So an individual company or you could kind of look at and say, all right, this is how we perform. Gee, if you're on the lower end of things, and this is a category that you care about, you might say, all right, well, clearly there's opportunity for improvement here. Maybe this is something I should focus on, or alternatively, oh, we're doing really well. Maybe this is something I can report out to different constituencies that might find this important or compelling. But if you're on this end, the opportunity for improvement is here on this next slide. We converted things to a simple graph here, and this is something you can do on your own as well, but just kind of thinking through, if your average is at, say, in this case, $22.22 an hour, all these individual activities in green are those that have market rates above that average, and those in red are below that average. And so the simple math is, or the simple lever, is if you want to improve your average value or the overall leverage of your volunteers' time, see if you can steer people from the red activities to more of the green activities, and that will naturally increase that number. And again, in kind of the general findings, unsurprisingly, you find that the skills-based volunteerism tends to be more valuable, and as I'd noted, it can be over 5 times the value. But at the same time, we found that a lot of the companies that participated, it's really a pretty small portion of their overall volunteerism. So that's really a great opportunity for improvement. So one note down here, and this is relevant to all the different categories we look at, is we present data on the different outcomes, or you could collect data on the different social and business outcome areas, and it should be just one piece of data that goes into your consideration set. You can't expect to hit it out of the park in every single category, and sometimes you might not be well leveraged on the social side, but it may be wonderful from a skill development or satisfaction side. You know, that's fine, that's wonderful. Just the whole idea is to have the data or have the insights to make some deliberate decisions about how to best design or manage your program to achieve your individual company's main objectives. So that's market value. The next is the impact on the nonprofits themselves, and this is we collect some data here that I'll show you first to kind of contextualize it. The idea of an outcome, you know, you're with volunteerism or pro bono or skills-based volunteerism, you're providing some services to a nonprofit, and you're part of that equation, if you will, of the service that they're providing. So in this case, of, say, a homeless shelter, ultimately their outcome is, or short-term outcome is housing someone or providing shelter to a homeless individual. And in this case, say their cost is, it costs $40.28 per person sheltered for 1 night. So what we're looking at from an impact perspective on the nonprofit is really an opportunity to change that ROI equation. And so what we looked at is the degree to which, and we asked the volunteers to report back on any observable direct impacts of their activities on helping the nonprofit either to reach more people, operate more efficiently, or improve the effectiveness of the services that they're providing. And either of those 3 categories can help change that ROI equation. So this is just an example, but say taking that $40.28 for one individual and changing that equation to 1.5 individuals, we're increasing the overall capacity of the people or beneficiaries served. So the data that we collected was from the volunteers themselves, and we can talk about that. It's a good step in the right direction. It's not kind of the perfect reporting, but we can chat about that. But we did get a lot of really interesting data, and we asked folks to report on any observable impact in any of those categories. And then for the individual companies, we could then aggregate the results and show which types of individual activities were most effective at either increasing reach or efficiency or effectiveness. So it's, again, some more insight into identifying what works particularly well within your volunteer portfolio. So say you can encourage more of it and build on it and maximize your, in this case, social ROI. Next, so we looked at social value. Next are skills and satisfaction that we kind of categorize as employee effects. First, satisfaction, we collected information on a category that a lot of companies collect information on, and that's satisfaction with the individual event. And we found not a lot of variability there. The vast majority of participating companies and volunteers were kind of in this narrow band of high 70s to low 80s. But then what we did is we connected it to things that HR departments most care about, and that's more the business value of satisfaction, and that's how does it relate to overall job satisfaction. So not just with an individual event, but how does that contribute to someone's overall perspective or satisfaction with their job. So, and you could see there's much greater variability here, and actually the average is lower. And the variability went from about 45% all the way up to 75%. So this just gives you not only greater opportunity to convey information that might be compelling to leadership or your HR department, but also there's probably more variability within your own companies that gives you an opportunity to improve your impact. Again, in this next slide, we present this the same graph or same structure that we had for social value, and that's where we just take the average again and break out those individual activities that are performing better than the average in green or below average in red. So if you particularly care about satisfaction, or you feel like there's some opportunity for improvement, either steer people from the red activities to the green, or look at those that are performing particularly well and look at how they're designed and see if you can borrow some design elements from those top performers and incorporate them into some lower performing volunteer activities that you may still be committed to. So it might be a continuous improvement opportunity there. Kind of the learning here, not anything terribly new, but now there's some pretty interesting data behind it. The whole idea of just matching opportunities with your volunteers' interests, and as we'll see also with skills as well. But here we found that among the volunteers who are matched by things like the proper social cause, or people who are particularly looking forward to socializing or networking opportunities, or skill development, or you can read them here, camaraderie, and so on. Those when properly matched, the achievement of that highest realm of satisfaction is significantly greater than those instances where the volunteers aren't well matched to the activity. Okay, so next is skill development, and this is obviously one of the more popular business benefits related to volunteerism, but it doesn't kind of automatically occur or always occur when you're looking at it from a business perspective. And in our view, it's useful to break it down into 3 different categories of skill development, and you can read them here: personal skills, existing skills, or job-relevant skills. And let me just use an example as we run through it. Say within your company you have an accountant, someone in your internal accounting department going off to do a habitat build. And then that person learns some home improvement skills. Now those are valuable skills, and because of it, that may improve their personal satisfaction with the event, but we already captured that on the previous slide. But home improvement skills are not particularly relevant to their job. So from a business perspective, there's no real business value there. So it's really, it's skill development but related to satisfaction. Similarly, there may be, say, that accountant goes off and decides to do some tax preparation for free for a nonprofit. And that's exercising existing skills, and that's a wonderful, more skills-based opportunity to increase leverage and generate more social value. But again, we already touched on the social value earlier on, but it's not so relevant to their individual jobs. If they've done, say, 1,000 different tax returns, doing one more probably isn't going to expand their skills at all. So again, in this subcategory, no real business value from a skill development perspective. But in this last one, when you're looking at those skills that might be expanded or stretched a bit that are job relevant, that's really the sweet spot for business value or the HR department. And so say an accountant, separate accountant example from a private firm decides to do some of those pro bono tax returns, and that firm is planning on, they'd always operated in the private sector space, and they're planning to move into the public sector space. That can be directly job relevant and something to expand that person's skills and experiences as they move to open new markets. So this job relevant skill area, that sweet spot, is really what we focus on with the ROI initiative. And the categories that tend to be most relevant from that perspective are either management responsibility, stakeholder or customer interaction, relevant subject matter or domain experience, or other job skills. It's always good to kind of have another category that people can still relate to what you're looking for, as long as they define it. So you can see here that the variation was really significant among the different companies, and it was quite interesting to see what these look like for different companies and flesh out those different improvement opportunities. And again, using this graph, kind of where are you with an average? What are the ones that are above average? What are the ones that are below? If you want to improve this area, either steer people from the red to the green activities, or again, look at those, the design elements of the top performers and see if you can incorporate them into the lower performing activities. Again, these findings support that whole idea of promoting skills-based volunteerism, obviously from this perspective. And the best designed or most strategic programs were about 16 times as productive in this area as the lowest in the benchmarking group. All right, this last category, we have this category of other business benefits. We look at sales, recruiting, and risk, or other stakeholder relationships. And these are categories that actually don't happen, these kind of impacts don't tend to happen with great frequency with traditional volunteerism, but they do happen occasionally, and sometimes when they happen, they can be quite significant. So we made sure to include that in our data gathering and measurement initiatives. And you can see here, particularly like around sales, there were, again, pretty significant variability, but the vast majority of companies were kind of in the teens or below. What we did was we asked individual volunteers to report on whether during the course of their volunteer activity they either developed a new relationship or strengthened an existing one that led to either an immediate new business opportunity or seemed likely to lead to one in the foreseeable future. So they would catalog those and also report on the value of those new business opportunities if they were relevant. We did the same with recruiting. Again, any new or existing relationships that led to new recruits, so they would cite those particular instances and then give some narrative data actually on the nature of the recruits and kind of the status of where they were in the hiring process. And then finally, we call them this category as risk effects. It's really we're collecting information on different stakeholders. So a volunteer would identify whether they had developed any new relationships or strengthened existing ones with an important, significant stakeholder that they would define, and the categories are things like either business partner, advocacy group, regulator, legislator, community group, any individual or group that is may be affected by or could materially affect the interests of your company. And just simple tracking those instances of relationships being developed, and then some additional descriptive data that I'm not presenting here, but that you can have to access to get more insights on the nature of that. And so you can get a sense either with any of these, gee, how important, you may say, oh, we had a couple recruiting effects or a couple stakeholder effects or even a couple sales effects. That's not very big, but maybe I can dive in a little bit more, see the details of that, and investigate whether it's something that we can expand on and maybe change the design of our programs a little bit to encourage more of these effects to occur. Particularly in this area, particularly in sales, there are examples where companies, it just doesn't make sense for them. Like a particular category, we present a lot of different data and impact data, and as we'll speak about at the Volunteerism conference in New Orleans with a representative from Boeing, they're a good example of how, as you'd imagine, if people are going out into the community with traditional volunteerism, they're probably not going to sell a whole lot of airplanes, right? So it's just not, they're not that kind of a business. They're more of a B2B business versus, say, a consumer products company that might have greater opportunity to, say, develop relationships that lead to sales. So the point here is to kind of, again, step back and appreciate that all the different data in these different categories, this kind of thing was internal to them. No one was seeing it on the outside, and they and you, as you collect your own data, should not feel compelled to hit it out of the park in every single category. Rather, focus on those things that are relevant to your company and particularly a priority for you or your department.
Darren, can you hear me?
Yep.
So, we had one question from the audience, and I thought I'd interrupt since it's pertinent, but they were curious if this data includes global employees or just U.S. employees.
It includes both. It's primarily U.S. employees, but we did have some companies that did included some of their global operations. The idea for this benchmarking network is over time to expand it pretty significantly in a way that we can start developing sub-benchmarking groups among individual industries and then even among different geographic locations, because as we all know, the dynamics can be different from place to place. But as it stood, we had the 21 organizations that were that stepped forward to participate, and we just used that as one kind of single benchmarking group. So this last graph, this is just, again, that same concept with whether it's sales or recruiting or stakeholder relations, kind of tracking your own average and figuring out which are those individual opportunities that are performing well versus those that you might either look to improve or steer people away from into the higher performing activities. So that covers it. I mean, those are the different social and business impact areas. And as I mentioned, what we've gone over here is obviously what we included in the Points of Light benchmarking initiative. And I'm happy to go into any further detail on how this worked and so on. But I'm also happy to chat about other ways to tackle some of these different impact areas. What we were all very happy about was we did cover really a lot of ground just using surveys, and that's wonderful because it's an extremely cost-effective way to do things. Before we kind of move to any other questions, I thought maybe I'd jump in. I did include a couple screen grabs from the final report so people could just get a sense of what those looked like. So this final report, individual companies would get it about 6 or 7 slides, again, custom to the company and all confidential. Only they see those results. No one else sees their results, and all the benchmarking is anonymous. And so all the information that we just ran through is included in this formatting. So the overall top-level summary, benchmarking, numbers and ratings and rankings, the nature of the benchmarking group, and then as you dive into individual categories like social, satisfaction, skill development, sales, and so on, distilling down how you performed, what the benchmark results were, and those opportunities for improvement using that graph, or kind of tracking which were the top performing volunteer activities in the different categories that you most care about. And also people are often interested in the instrument itself. It gets custom branded with an email that goes out. Actually, a company can send it out to their employees on their own and just embed a link. But then the survey page has custom branding and then a lot of the standardized questions listed here. And we use a lot of, you can see it here, we call them reveals. So one of the great things about volunteerism and CSR, broadly speaking, is that it can have a whole bunch of different ripple effects and benefits from a social and business perspective. But the challenge with that is if you want to collect good comprehensive data on that, you have to be ready to ask like a zillion different questions, which is a great way to get people not to fill out your surveys. So we spent a lot of time in not overwhelming folks with that kind of instrument and to keep them on the same page by different categories, give 2 or 3 questions in high-level categories, and then if they click into a category that's relevant to them, it does a reveal and asks for specific information. So that's a kind of shameless pitch for anyone who's interested in joining the Points of Light initiative, and that about covers it. So why don't we move on to questions?
Sure, that would be great. Farron, if you could go back 2 slides to the sample survey. I've had it there, perfect. Well, I did have an audience question who wants to know if we could hear some more examples of the questions, and maybe these are a little hard to read, but maybe you could read some of these out loud or share a few more of the examples.
Sure. So this is actually related to an example that we looked at in the satisfaction category. So we're asking information about, gee, how satisfying did you find this volunteer project? And then giving kind of a Likert scale level here, more or less text-based. And then we asked some information about what were the main drivers of that satisfaction. So the cause, the activity, the convenience, socializing, networking, skill development, or other meaningful benefits. And in some cases, when they click in some additional detail, like in this case for networking, was it the camaraderie with your existing colleagues, networking with new colleagues or business contacts, or just the social aspect? I mean, so what we've done here, oh, and then this last one is doing that connection to overall job satisfaction. You know, is it slightly important? Is it a core component? And so on. So what we've done is we've mapped out the universe of potential impacts from volunteerism in all these different categories, social and business categories, and incorporated them into these tools to give people the option of identifying them as to, you know, reporting on whether it occurred with their volunteer activity. And one kind of other design thing to note, we are asking the volunteers to report on an individual activity, not on an overall volunteer program. Because when folks report on an overall volunteer program, number one, you almost always get some kind of 90+% response about how people think it's great or it's valuable. And that's fine. It's just not terribly useful from an improvement perspective, actually, or even from a reporting perspective, just because that's done so much, it might have, I think it's kind of lost its punch. But what we do here is we ask people to report on their experience with an individual activity. So they get this, they say, all right, your most recent activity, report to us what happened with it. So it's not, oh, I think it helps sales or I think it helps skill development. They're actually reporting on whether they did develop skills, what kind of skills they were, or did they develop any new relationships related to sales or recruiting related to that particular activity. And that's what allows us to do those graphs that I showed you earlier to show which are the top performers and which are lagging. And it's also a lot more reliable than just people's generic perceptions or guesses about the value of volunteerism. So we're not asking their opinions, we're asking them to report observable facts. So it's more tracking than perception.
Great, thanks, Baron. And what, I know the caption at the top says it takes 2 to 4 minutes. Is that the total length of the survey? And what kind of response have you seen percentage-wise, and how it varies from company to company?
Oh, yeah. So we spent a lot of time on the survey questions and design and testing it and so on because we knew that people are surveyed a lot and they hate filling out surveys, and it's often a challenge to get good responses. So that in the information that we've gathered, it typically takes folks between 2 and 4 minutes to complete this survey that we came up with, so part of this initiative. And our response rates turned out to be really good. So it was between, I think it was on the earlier slide, between 24% and 55%, with the majority of companies coming in around the mid-30s, which is really quite good.
That is very impressive. It is a difficult task to get people to respond to surveys. This might be easy to respond to, but there was a question about if any of the individual company reports are available to our audience or the public, or aggregated data.
Yeah, so we do make aggregated data available, and that will be up on the VolunteerMatch site. So we have a kind of a white paper with the different results from the different categories, high-level results, and findings. So some of the things that we went through here, and then some sample pages from a general report. In terms of individual companies, all that information is confidential, and which was a big part of the design of this initiative, so people could feel like they're getting a or they had the opportunity or the space to find out where they might not be doing as well as they had hoped. So in contrast to say, hey, everyone participate in this initiative, and then we are going to put it up on the Points of Light website how everyone did in the different categories, yeah, that's kind of a headache that people don't need. So they can take the data and publicize it however they want, but they get it in confidence, and all the benchmarking is anonymous.
Great. And similarly, are sample questions from the survey available so someone can learn more?
There are some questions included in the documents that we made public, and so people are for sure free to look at those. And if they'd like more information about particular categories, and this is true for any of this, you could just drop us a line directly.
So to piggyback on that, with the companies that you've worked with already and have gotten their responses, what have you seen them do in reaction to this? What have they done with the information, or how have they improved their current program?
Yeah, so we're keenly interested in that point because we care a lot about this being a practical tool and not just a nice academic initiative that people look at, appreciate, and then put on a shelf, never to return to it again. So we, so far, our plan for 2011 is to do tracking, very specific deliberate tracking of the participating companies, and to document how they are using it in terms of reporting, or how they're using it for continuous improvement, or to guide their decision-making processes on how to manage their programs. Right now, it's so we're going to move towards a more systematic approach for that, to gathering feedback and producing white papers to guide people on, and providing some ideas and guidance on how they can do it on their own. So far, we've just heard from some companies here and there, and actually I know Boeing will be presenting this at the Volunteerism conference. Some examples definitely around reporting, and in some cases about looking at, all right, here are a couple kinds of volunteer activities that are performing really well. Let's see if we can, maybe we should do more of them. And yeah, so that's kind of consistent with the overall vision of the initiative. We just are looking forward to getting a more comprehensive view of how expansive that is, to also see if we can make sure to encourage it among companies.
Wonderful. There have been a few timing questions that have come up. First, and we do have, our audience is made up of both corporate and nonprofit listeners right now, so I think it's interesting kind of seeing the take on this survey from both sides of the relationship. One question is, how soon after a specific volunteer event is this survey administered? Do you work with companies, to focus on current ones, or how does that get planned out?
So the way we've been doing it, and which has worked out pretty well, is that we have two approaches. Either we do what's called a snapshot, or we do full year version. So a snapshot is just when a company will say, all right, I want to send out surveys to this defined group of volunteers, and maybe that defined group are people who volunteered over the previous 2 or 3 months, and maybe doing that during a high point in your volunteer season, or something that captures a couple signature events that you most care about. And you collect that data, and that gives you a very good sense of what your impact is for that. If it's a good representative sample, it gives you a good sense of things and kind of ballpark results. And we actually had some companies that went back for many months, and we still got good data with that. But we think the sweet spot is sending it out for up to the previous, say, three months or so. So the alternative is to do a full year version where you just do essentially a snapshot every quarter. And the idea with that is that you don't want to over-survey people, and so you'd almost be penalizing your top volunteering employees if you made them fill out one of these things every time they volunteered. And if you get good coverage and say throughout the year, or even with a snapshot, if you have a good representative group, then it's just a matter of extrapolating out what's the overall effect of your program. So if you're capturing 20% of your volunteers, get your results, and the percentages will be all the same. It won't matter if it's a representative sample. If you have 20% or 70%, your percentages should still be the same. But to get the overall net value of things, you get 20% multiplied by 5, and that will give you a good sense of what your overall footprint is.
Great. And in addition, what is the average time frame for one of these research projects, from collecting the data to delivering it?
That's, let's see. The way it is currently working is that we've launched the surveys, and according to whatever the company is interested in, if they're like, oh, we have this thing in the summer or the fall, or we want to get Earth Day or MLK Day, whatever, that's totally up to them. But then waiting until what we did when we first launched it, which is this past year, over the last summer, we then waited till the end of the year to generate the reports and deliver it back to the companies. And that was so we could just make sure that all the participating companies were done, and we could have as complete a benchmarking data set as we could have. Going forward, as we've got a number of new companies that we've added to the mix, and we're probably going to, for this year, wait until the end of the year and do the same thing. But then going forward, it looks like we'll have a good enough data set that we could almost do that on a continuous basis, like almost real time. You gather the data back, or we gather the data, and then you go and access your report just based on our live library of benchmarking data.
Saren, I have a question from one of our nonprofit audience members. For the nonprofits that actually have projects with corporations that tend to be in the lower ranking area, that kind of percentages are lower as far as satisfaction and job improvement, have you seen examples of how they use that data, or kind of reconfigure it so that it's still a positive relationship for that nonprofit and company?
I haven't seen it yet, and we just had a couple of nonprofits that were involved, but we do, the promise is the same, and in fact we'll be diving into this actually with some real detail with Junior Achievement this year, but we had other nonprofits involved previously, where it's a great opportunity to kind of figure out what are the things that you are performing well at, and presenting that to companies and saying, look, you should come and volunteer with us because here are some real benefits. And then at the same time, if there are places that are not working out as well, figuring out, gee, how can you adjust the program so it increases that the scores. And even if it's not possible, say, oh, we just don't have a lot of skills-based volunteer activities here. Okay, that's fine, but maybe look at some of the other categories and maybe be a little more deliberate in designing, say, let's say, inviting a company to volunteer with your nonprofit, and nudge them to bring along teams of people who don't normally work together. so your pitch there is, oh, this is a real networking opportunity, like for to develop new relationships with colleagues that you are unfamiliar with, or even like new business, like you had to mix up different companies together. And so that's with all the different categories we looked at, there's I think ample opportunity to be creative, pick out the thing that you can have some strength in, and play to that strength, and it'd be a great way to attract more businesses or strengthen your relationships with them, and increase your social impact.
Great, thank you, Farron. There are a few people I'll connect you with after who had some specific questions about kind of how they could get involved. So before we move to my wrap-up slides, I wanted to hear if you had any final thoughts or things you'd like to leave with the audience.
Oh, you're asking, sorry, that you're kind of echoing there. Was that a question about final thoughts?
Oh, yes, for okay. Your last words.
Okay. Maybe my final thought is to reiterate the fact that, look, we went through a bunch of different categories of information, and individually, when you're hearing it, you're probably saying, oh, that makes sense, gee, that's not so hard, that's not so hard. But then when you go through cumulatively, it can feel like kind of an overwhelming thing. And unfortunately, I think that's one of the weaknesses in the measurement arena, is once people feel a little kind of overwhelmed, or gee, this is hard, then immediately it's easier to kind of push it off and then focus on all the other priorities that you have. So I just encourage you to think about one, maybe two of the impact areas that we looked at, and just focus on those and forget about everything else. And then you'll find that it's not hard to do, and it can be really valuable data for reporting or continuous improvement and management. And that might suit you for a half a year or a year, or you immediately find it very easy and say, gee, I'm going to move on to a couple other categories. Just start small, because this stuff, if it's hard, it's going to fail, and you might as well not even try. And it doesn't need to be hard. It can be practically done, and it can be wonderfully useful.
Thank you, Farron. It's good to stay positive. For those on the call, thank you for joining us. I will send out a version of the presentation after, and you can also watch a recording on the VolunteerMatch YouTube channel shortly. Continue to stay informed, connect with our CSR blog, and sign up for our newsletter. And stay tuned for upcoming webinars this spring and fall. We have a few organizations up on the screen that will be coming to speak with us for another BPN. So thank you, everyone, and big thank you to Farron for joining us and bringing true impact to our audience.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity, and I appreciate everyone's interest.
Wonderful. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Take care.